My relationship with my memory might be my most dubious. As much as I cherish it, I often use it to construct oversimplified ideas about who I was and how I once felt. When I was 7, my older brother Ian, a free spirited teenager with a rigid jawline, shaggy hair, and a smattering of freckles, similar yet more prominent than mine, died. Ian was skateboarding late one evening with his friends and began to lose control while hurtling down a steep hill. In an attempt to soften his inevitable crash, he jumped towards a nearby patch of grass, but missed and struck his head on the nearby curb. With no helmet to protect his head, Ian suffered serious brain damage that had him laying in a coma for weeks on end, and eventually passing away. Ever since I can remember, I was convinced that I accepted my brother's death, better than anyone could. I am a person given to nostalgia, but I never saw myself as someone who was overly attached to the past, especially when it came to relationships, because I pride myself so much on my autonomy. My reluctance to lean on others allowed me to think I had come to terms with my brother's death. However, my grief was just kicked under the rug in an attempt to make a world that was rosier than mine. Originally, I had actually told myself that my chapel talk wouldn't be about my brother. As an underclassman, I often daydreamed during chapel talks about what I would talk about. I always thought that I should or would have anything else to talk about. I always thought that writing about the death of a family member was so cliche it would cause freshman me to roll my eyes into the back of my head and proceed to nap until the sound of obligatory applause rang in my ear and prompted me to stand up. While much of this I attribute to my constant need to be different, part of me did want to open up. I was still not ready to treat the wounds I bandaged up some years ago. A few years ago, however, on my brother's 26th birthday, the emotions I attempted to hide had manifested into something I could no longer ignore. I had spent the day visiting my brother's grave with my family, where we released balloons and wished him a happy birthday. It was a usual event and not much different from my brother's previous birthdays. However, that night, I began watching some of music critic Anthony Fantano's latest album reviews. Fantano gave Matt Urie's record A Crow Looked at Me a strong 9, and it was about the premature death of the artist's wife. So I thought it fit the evening's mood. As the album played, I began to reminisce on my favorite moments with my brother, and the memories I yearned to make with him as we grew up together. Before I could even get to the second track, I was weeping and felt so overwhelmed I could barely breathe. That night, I realized I had only put on a facade to mask my true feelings. My bandages were breaking, and my wounds were still untreated. In the ensuing months, I thought a lot about forever and never. I recognized how fleeting all my relationships were and the memories that accompanied them. I often oscillated between disorienting regret and slow burning grief. Eventually, I began steadily working towards accepting my relationship with my brother for what it was by absorbing the wisdom of those around me. And while I never had a moment of epiphany, there was one moment I look back on that impacted me tremendously. One night, after watching the film Calling by Your Name, I went back and rewatched Michael Stahlberg's monologue. It resonated with me the first time I watched it, and after multiple viewings, I now find solace in it. At the end of the film, the protagonist, Elio, has a father-son talk where his dad, played by Michael Stahlberg, professes his thoughts and emotions on the end of Elio's first love with another man. He tells his son, "When you least expect it, nature has cunning ways of finding our weakest spot. Just remember, I am here. Right now, you may not want to feel anything. Perhaps you never wish to feel anything. And perhaps it's not to me that you'll want to speak about these things, but feel something you obviously did. You had a beautiful friendship, maybe more than a friendship, and I envy you. In my place, most parents would hope the whole thing goes away, to pray that their sons land on their feet. But I am not such a parent. In your place, if there is pain, nurse it. And if there is a flame, don't snuff it out. Don't be brutal with it. We rip out so much of ourselves to be cured of things faster that we go bankrupt by the age of 30 and have less to offer each time you start with someone new. But to make yourself feel nothing, so as not to feel anything, what a waste. While I had stopped trying to feel nothing about my brother, I was still wallowing in the nostalgia that dwelled on the past rather than taking comfort in it. I was no longer running from my past, but was still a prisoner to it. Embracing the words of Elio's father, I chose to not simply reflect on my past, but to embrace it. Whether it's times I was simply a bystander, like when my brother and his friend got into a baby powder fight the day before my relatives came to town, leaving the living room in a winter wonderland, or when I was playing Halo with him on the box TV in his room that was plastered with mid-2000s punk band posters. I began to find peace rather than anxiety or anger in reflecting on all these moments we shared. In doing so, I learned that at the crux of acceptance is appreciation. Now, when reflecting on these sentimental memories with my brother, I'm more grateful for the time we shared. That even though I will always think it was never enough, it was. While I still struggle to master myself and my emotions, my time with my brother has gotten small enough in my rearview that I've convinced myself it was all good. If you haven't yet, you will come to a day where you find yourself rebelling against time, struggling to not dream of what could have and accept what was. You'll find yourself meticulously replaying memories so much they fossilize. You will inevitably find yourself wistful of your past and regretting that you never took the time to appreciate those around you. Now, while sometimes you have to go backward and reflect in order to move forward, you try and not get caught up in this nostalgia, because in doing so, there's often a slippery slope that lands you hoarding memories, consequently unable to make new ones. When trying to contextualize all this, I have to think about holding a phone. You can hold your phone effortlessly in the palm of one hand, or wrap both your grips around it, aggressively and possessively, exerting all the energy you have to keep it in your hands. Either way, though, you're holding the phone, and the former lets you focus on the world around you and live in the present. So, instead of hoarding these memories, revel in them, but then release them from their captivity. Trust that they'll be there if you need them, and if not, accept the price of a life fully lived. Thank you.